you don't think it can happen to you.
The hit-and-run chase in California, a motorcycle rider witnessing a driver slam into several cars and then speeding away.
It can happen to you within seconds, a blink of an eye.
Tonight about the man suspected of killing a woman in a hit-and-run and his plan to evade justice.
When you take your eyes off the road for just seconds, when you're driving your car, oh, yes, it can happen to you. See, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. When the sands of time will run out within your hourglass.
New at 10, a hit and run caught on video, and now a teenager and his family are looking for the driver who took off.
He was a victim of a distracted driver hitting the road while riding his motorcycle going 65 miles per hour. He nearly lost his life. Now on a crusade to help save lives and prevent someone else from becoming a victim, the creator of DistractedDriversBusted.com and now the host of this podcast, it's Howard Drescher.
All right, welcome. Welcome to another show of DistractedDriversBusted.com, the podcast show. I am your host, Howard Drescher, the creator of DistractedDriversBusted.com, and of course now this podcast show. You can follow me on Twitter at DistractedDBTV, at DistractedDBTV, and of course on Facebook, it's DistractedDB. And today I have a very special guest, an author of Talk Crash to Me, Dawne McKay. She's a victim, survivor, and now an author. And of course today is the first episode of a 4-part series. We're talking about the do's and don'ts of surviving a crash. Coming up in just minutes, it's going to be my special guest right here on this very show.
You're listening to the DistractedDrivers.com podcast. We'll be right back.
Wake up and text. Text and eat. Text and meet up with a friend you haven't seen in forever.
Hi.
Oh, hey. Text and complain that they're on their phone the whole time. Text and listen to them complain that you're on your phone the whole time. Text and whatever. But when you get behind the wheel, give your phone to a passenger. Put it in the glove box. Just don't text and drive. Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A message from NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Now, back to the DistractedDrivers.com podcast.
All right, welcome back to DistractedDriversBusted.com, the podcast show. Again, I am your host, Howard Drescher, the creator of DistractedDriversBusted.com, and of course now this podcast show. Okay, so I have talked about this for many, many months. And of course, you know, our timelines, sometimes they just don't match, they don't hit. Several different things that came up in my life and a couple of things within my own guest. Things happened. We never connected. But finally, I have my guest, Dawne McKay. Now, she was on my show the last time in October 16th, 2018. She has done many, many things since I've had her on the show. She's built a website, a different website name. We're going to get to that in just a little bit. But the most impressive thing that I think of is she wrote a book. And the title of it is Talk Crash to Me. And I've read the book. And there's several things in the book that you should do and not do. Some of the things that I know that I've done, and some of the things I go, what? I never even thought of that. Welcome to the show, Dawne. How's everything?
Hi, Howard. Thanks very much. I'm doing quite well. And yourself?
I'm doing a lot better now. I know, like I said, we've been trying to get in touch probably about a year on and off, and finally we connect.
Yes, I'm very excited to be back on your show. I can't thank you enough for allowing me this time to reconnect and talk about my new website and the book that I wrote. So I do appreciate you taking the time, Howard.
Oh, no worries. I appreciate you being here. And I read the book. Now, I can honestly tell you this. There are things in this book that, quite honestly, to me, I have done after my crash. Some things I didn't do, and some things I knew certain things to do, but when you're in the moment, if you will, you kind of forget everything. So,
right.
So let's first start off with, and as I mentioned, you were on the show back in 2018, and that's when I first met you. And we've done the show then, and I know I got a lot of response from that because there was a lot of people that goes, "Oh my gosh, what she went through was so horrific." Can you recap just a little bit of the show and let people know what is going on?
Oh, sure. So I'm a survivor of a horrific motor vehicle crash that took place in 2012. I was on my way to work at a full stop waiting to make a left-hand turn when I was rear-ended, at a high rate of speed and pushed into the path of a transport truck. It was a horrific crash scene that left me with multiple injuries, including a horrific seatbelt wound and a traumatic brain injury. Emergency services were on site very quickly and transported me to a local hospital, where I was then transported to a trauma hospital, where I spent 3 days receiving 24-hour care. My crash was caused by a distracted driver that has changed my life forever. So back in 2018, when you were kind enough to have me on your show, I was just starting out trying to get the word out to other crash survivors, because it's really important for me as a survivor to bring as much awareness to other survivors that they are not alone when they're recovering from a motor vehicle crash, because I felt very alone as I recovered. And I started to, reach out to see if there was any other kind of support out there for motor vehicle crash survivors, because, it's quite a struggle and a challenge when you're in a crash. It's not just physical, it's mentally, it's financially, it's emotional. It's extremely life-changing. All of a sudden, one day you're happy and on your way to work and very stable with a full-time job, and within a few seconds, your life can change instantly. So on the path to recovery, I think a lot of people might think just the physical aspect of it, but there's just so much more to it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and with that said, at what point in time did you decide to sit down and actually write the book?
Well, at the beginning, now we're in Canada, and of course, we've been through the pandemic all across the world, and I never thought I would write a book, to be quite honest with you. I started off looking for support. I couldn't find it. I created an online support group for crash survivors on Facebook that anybody can join. It's the Crash Support Network group. And from there, it transpired into a quarterly newsletter. I became a crash survivor blogger, so I blog about my own personal experiences. And then I put it all together, and I created a wonderful website, crashsupportnetwork.com. So as we went into, I'm not sure if it was the first or the second lockdown, I kind of just sat and thought to myself, I think I might write a book.
Right.
And I think it would be very useful to crash survivors, and I want to write a book that I would have wanted someone to hand to me as I started my recovery. So it was a great distraction for me because of the stressful situation that the world found ourselves in. And I sat down and started to put everything together, and I self-published my book, Talk Crash to Me, I believe was March of this year. And so it's basically what to expect after surviving a motor vehicle collision and how to manage your recovery. So I kind of put it, I mentioned quite a few personal experiences and what I went through personally, what you should or shouldn't do. And again, it's a book that I would want every crash survivor to have as they start their recovery. And the reviews I'm getting are quite remarkable. A lot of people can't thank me enough. They have told me it feels like a giant hug that they needed as they're in recovery. A lot of people mentioned that they wish they had known about the book sooner, but they're glad that they've read it now. So it's becoming quite successful in a way that I wasn't sure. Of course, when you write a book, I've never written a book. I wasn't sure how it would take off, but I put my heart into it, and I thought, if I could even help 2 or 3 crash survivors by allowing them to read Talk Crash to Me, a crash survivor's perspective, then it will be so worth it. So my book is available on Amazon, and like I say, it's been quite successful so far. So I'm still trying to, of course, get the word out as much as I can to let crash survivors know that there is this book, Talk Crash to Me, that will help them tremendously to get through the first terrifying, challenging part of their recovery. Mm-hmm.
I got to tell you, though, Dawn, when I started sitting down and reading the book and I kept going through it, I instantly went through my head my whole entire crash, my whole scenario that I had from my recovery, and I'm doing, yes, no, I didn't do this. Yes, I did this. Well, I never thought of this. And to me, I think it's a great book. And yes, it would have been fantastic to have a book like this after my crash. But you actually came through and you did your research and your own investigations as far as what you think that should have happened, things that really help a lot of people. I know it helped me, even though after I've had my crash a while ago, and yet I still go, oh, wow, I should have done this and I didn't do it. But I do have this book in my car all the time now. So in case something happens, I can go, wait a minute. And we're going to get into some of these examples, or at least I got to ask you, how long did it take you to do the whole thing, the book?
I would say I probably worked on it steadily, close to 8 or 9 months. Wow. And then, of course, I self-taught myself. I was going to go with a publisher, and then I started doing some research, and I decided to go just to self-publish it myself because Amazon makes it rather quite easy for people to write their own books nowadays. So I decided to go the self-publishing route. So, I would say close to 9 months to put it all together. I worked with a graphic designer. I also involved an Ontario law firm to get a legal perspective. So I was including him as well. We were working on it together to put the book together. So, I would say probably 9 months. Mm-hmm.
All right, that's awesome. Okay, my special guest today is Dawne McKay, and she wrote this book, and we're going to dive into the chapters right now. And the book is called Talk Crash to Me. And Dawn, looking at this, in the beginning, in the chapter, it talks about you or your family member has to seek legal representation immediately. Now, in your mind, why would this be so important?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I think a lot of people that are involved in a motor vehicle crash tend to prioritize the most important thing that would be on their mind at that particular time, because a lot of these crashes can be life-changing. So, of course, you're thinking about your job. The first thing I thought of when I was in my motor vehicle crash has somebody contacted my employer to let them know I can't make it in today? Because it's just human instinct. I think we all think the same way. Or if you've got a family or kids or daycare, or you have kids in your vehicle, if you have to contact your spouse or in-laws, etc. So there's a process that I think in human nature, the very first thing, that comes to mind is, oh my goodness, my car, I got to get my car fixed, I got to call my employer, etc. And a lot of people don't realize, I think, that, the first thing that anybody should be doing when they're in a motor vehicle crash is, of course, to seek medical attention as soon as possible. And your second step would be to speak to an attorney that specializes in personal injury law. And it's important because a vast majority of personal injury lawyers offer free consultations. Mm-hmm. So you're not having to put any money out. You could just call them to get a free consultation to say that, that I was in a crash this morning. I had to seek medical attention. The police were called, etc., just to find out if you have a claim going forward. So now I'm in Ontario, Canada, so it would be different to the States when it comes to, motor vehicle claims, etc. But it's just so important. I can't stress it enough. There's timelines involved. There's deadlines involved dealing with personal injury law, whether you're at fault or not in a motor vehicle crash, you should still seek a consultation from a personal injury lawyer just to see where you stand, because a lot of people might be in a motor vehicle crash, they might go to the hospital to get checked out, and they might think they're okay, and they'll go home and they're thinking about going back to work the next day. They're not allowing themselves a few days to see if there's going to be any long-term effects from the crash itself. And I can't stress it enough that when you are in a motor vehicle crash, that you have to seek medical attention, and you definitely have to speak to a personal injury lawyer. I can't tell you how many times survivors have reached out to me privately within the online support group, asking me what a personal injury lawyer is and why should I see a personal injury lawyer. What do they do? And you're talking that some of these survivors have been involved in a crash 6 or 7 months ago. And I think, oh my gosh, they've already talked to insurance, or they thought they were going to be okay, and now they're realizing, the long-term effect that at first they didn't realize that they had a back issue, and all of a sudden now they find themselves that they can't work, that they're in chronic pain because of a back issue. So I can't stress it enough that it's just so important to see a personal injury lawyer. It's well worth it, even if they can guide you in the right direction, explain everything, and let you know what steps to take going forward.
Well, I got to tell you, I agree, because I know when I had my crash, unfortunately, it happened so fast, and next thing I knew, I was already in the ambulance. And so I didn't get a chance to meet the person that actually that did this, where I can try to get their information as well. I wanted to get their license and all that and take photos, but there was so many people there because it was on the freeway out here in California. All that stuff was kind of done for me, but it depends also on the severity. You got to have time to go ahead and take photos, get the information, exchange information, insurance company, contact an attorney like you indicated, get and have them handle the case. That way you can kind of focus on the recovery. At least that's what it was for me.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. If you're recovering, that should be your number one priority. And when you hire a personal injury lawyer, they're going to look after everything for you as much as they possibly can, and your main focus should be your recovery. Absolutely.
Now here's something that I wanted to ask you about, because in a book you talk a little bit about you as a person. Talking to your colleagues or talking to the insurance company representative adds a lot more stress, and it's a stressful situation for you. Let your lawyers kind of handle it. Yes,
absolutely. Like I just mentioned, the top priority should be your recovery. It's human nature. I went through it myself when I was in my motor vehicle crash. I had a lot of electronic equipment that belonged to the business that I was currently employed with. I was worried about their BlackBerry. I was worried about their laptop, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just human nature, well, who's going to do my job? Who's going to check my emails? I have outstanding things that are on the go and projects, and your mind is just swimming and swimming and swimming. And, you have to make your recovery top priority. If you start speaking to your employer or colleagues, and even maybe some friends, close friends, et cetera, it will add more undue stress. I found that I literally had to take a step back. There's just going to be so much going on, physically, mentally. I had to follow up with 4 or 5 different doctors at the trauma hospital. Like, I mean, it is extremely overwhelming. Yeah, I would definitely stress, like you say, recovery is the top priority. And you know, adding, you know, talking to your employer or insurance or colleagues would just add more stress, because you're going to feel anxious because you want to get back and work. We all want to get back and work. We want our lives back where it was yesterday. But, you know, now because of the motor vehicle crash, you can't get back to work. So if you're contacting colleagues from your place of employment, then you're just going to get more anxious because you want to be there. You know, my crash happened in the middle of November, you know, and of course people are out Christmas shopping and there's Christmas dinners. And, you know, my employer I worked for put on a beautiful, you know, she would treat us to a beautiful dinner out, the entire office, you know, and I was sitting on the couch going, you know, I want to be there, you know, but I just couldn't be there. And I had to walk away because I really had to just focus on me, you know, and get better and get through the recovery.
And I think that's hard to do, too, because, like you said, human nature is get back to where you were the day before.
Sure. And, you know, there's the financial struggle as well, you know, again, Canadian versus states here, you know. I wasn't sure if I had short-term disability. How do I do that? Does the employer offer that? If they don't offer that, well, how am I going to get an income? How long am I going to be off of work? Am I going to lose my job? I had a follow-up appointment with the trauma surgeon that told me you'll need a year off, the minimum. A year. You'll have to have a year off. And I was completely flabbergasted. And I thought, a year? What?
Wow.
What do you mean a year? You know, and then, of course, you're struggling, thinking, well, what's going to happen to my job? Or, you know, is someone else going to do my job? Are they going to hold my, you know? So there's quite a challenge ahead of people when they're in a motor vehicle crash, you know, as you know. Mm-hmm. You know, you struggle, and it's a challenge, and you're overwhelmed. A lot of stuff goes on, sure.
Exactly. We're talking crash, or Talk Crash to Me, and we're talking with Dawne McKay. Dawne, here's something that I found kind of interesting in the book that was, it made me think very, very deeply about what happened. You talk about you're not alone, you know, you're not alone as each and every one of us, as they kind of replay in a way. You kind of replay the crash in your head. You're not alone doing that. Everybody has done it. That's the way I perceive that you're talking about. But the thing that happened with me is every time I thought about the crash, everything was in slow motion. It just over and over again. Is that a part that eventually would go away? I know for me it did eventually, but does everybody end up losing it? You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, I can only speak through my own personal experience. Yeah, I call that the what if. You try to put the pieces back together. You know, part of that is, you know, what if I had left 10 minutes sooner? What if I had left 10 minutes later? What if I had taken another route? The day of my motor vehicle crash, I can only remember bits and pieces to this day. So it's been 9 years ago, and if you were to ask me exactly what happened that day, I still will not be able to tell you because there's a lot of missing pieces. So, of course, you know, you go through the flashbacks and the nightmares, and because your mind wants to know exactly what went on that day. And you say slow motion. I'm not going to say mine was slow motion, but I went over it and over it. You know, I remember someone holding my hand waiting for an ambulance. I don't remember how they got me out of the vehicle. I remember getting to the first hospital. I don't remember getting to the trauma hospital. So there was a lot of it I had to learn, I guess, by what people were telling me, what the police were telling me and what the police had reported. I could only go by what they were telling me. So personally, with my experience, oh my goodness, it must have gone on well over a year. But It does get easier. It does get easier. But I would say well over a year, I went through the what ifs and trying to put the pieces back together on that particular day. So it does get easier. For my own perspective, it does get easier. You know, I think everybody has their own way. You know, it would have to be up to the person, the survivor itself, I guess, that we're all different. So even though we're in a motor vehicle crash, every recovery is different, completely different. So, you know, for me personally, yeah, it was well over a year before I started to notice a difference of slowly, gradually not focusing on that 100% every day.
Well, this kind of leads me into my next topic. There's two more things I want to talk about in today's show. And by the way, just to let you know that Dawne is going to be with me probably for 3 more episodes until we're not going to cover every little detail in the book. We're going to hit what we think are maybe some of the highlights of the book. And then you can get by the book and then read the whole entire thing to get a full-fledged understanding of everything that happens. But there's 2 more things I want to talk about. And one of them is you talk about the things that only a survivor could tell you. Some of the most comforting words. What are they?
Oh, goodness. I think I mentioned probably about...
Yeah, you said about how you're gonna be okay with these kind of you let another person that has been in a crash can actually sit down and talk to you and let you know you're going to survive. You're going to be okay because I survived the crash too. And with that, so it's almost kind of like somebody who's been this experience before. Okay, now I trust you. What you're telling me, if you survived it, I can survive it.
Exactly. That. It's gonna be really tough, and it's going to be a challenge, and it's going to be a real struggle. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So when I started recovering, I would say 4 or 5 months into my recovery, I just didn't think it would ever end. It was constant medical appointments. It was dealing with my personal injury lawyer. It was dealing with, my rehabilitation team that I had in place, which is extremely crucial as you recover, that you have to have a rehabilitation team in place as you recover, because they're your number one cheerleader to make sure that, they try their best, and that's what they're there for, to try to get you back to where you once were. So because I felt that personally about 6 months in, that I just didn't think it would ever end, tears in the middle of the day, having another appointment, not being able to sleep, the chronic pain, the financial stress, nobody was really telling me, just hang in there. You're going to get through this, and you will make it. There's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. And unfortunately, I felt the need to mention that in Talk Crash to me, because I think a lot of survivors out there feel extremely isolated, feel very alone, because I know personally I reached a certain point a few months in that I couldn't really talk to anybody close to me anymore, because I wanted their lives to go on and continue. And I started isolating myself, trying to do everything myself, because I didn't want to be a burden anymore. Because a lot of people think that if they don't see you hurt physically by their eyes, then they're going to just think you're okay.
Exactly.
And we're not okay. There's a lot going on underneath the covers, so to speak. So it's very important to me to let crash survivors out there know that, not to give up and to stay strong, and, to expect extremely overwhelming days, but survivors need to remember there's going to be a lot of good days too.
Exactly. And I think the last thing I want to talk about is, like, for me, after my crash, I had to drive the same direction every day. So that's the only route I had to get to work when I was 90% through my recovery. But even just driving past where that crash happened, it scared me. It gave me chills. It made me think about what happened. I started shaking. Now, I don't know, and I know you and I never really talked about this. Have you ever drove past that area where it happened to you?
Yes. I didn't drive. Actually, after my crash, I didn't get behind the wheel of another vehicle for at least 4 months. because I wasn't sure how I was going to respond because, of course, I was suffering from the post-traumatic stress disorder, and I really didn't know how I was going to respond. But I did get behind the wheel about 4 months after my crash, and thankfully, I just drove around the block. But you're not sure if you're going to have extreme flashbacks. You're having terrible nightmares in the evening. Does that mean, if I get behind the wheel, I'm going to have another flashback? But I was very grateful and thankful that didn't happen. And I was, I wasn't 100% comfortable behind the wheel, but I certainly wasn't having flashbacks because I was really concerned that I might have that. But as far as driving by the site, I don't think I drove by the site probably a year and a half after my crash. Mm-hmm. And it was actually a psychologist that recommended it.
Wow.
And I was very hesitant at first to even go there. But he explained to me that it would put a different perspective on that day for me. That not me. So it doesn't mean that you would go to the crash site and have flashbacks. He said, if you've got a few pieces of the puzzle that you want to put back together, he recommended and he encouraged me to go visit the crash site, to pull over and just take a few moments just to have a look. And I did about a year and a half after my crash. I didn't feel anything but sadness because my life had completely changed. There was a lot of traffic, and I did get a little nervous, standing on the side of the road. But I didn't really remember anything. I didn't get goosebumps like you got. I felt a lot of grief, a lot of sadness. I was questioning how it could have possibly happened.
Exactly.
I guess, I was just standing there thinking, how did this happen? So because of course I was rear-ended by a distracted driver, and I was just, I was kind of shocked, like just standing there thinking, how could this have possibly happened?
Well, I've been down that road before. My special guest today is Dawne McKay. Talk Crash to Me. Dawne, I want to thank you for being on the show, and we're going to probably do this again next week. Like I said, I think I can make this into a 4-episode podcast event, and I think it is important. It is important that your information gets out there to everybody, because each and every day, and you know it as much as I do, there's a crash almost every couple minutes. I think people are getting injured more and more. And it's just people are in their own little world doing their own thing. Dawne, again, I want to thank you for being with me.
Thank you very much, Howard. I really appreciate it.
No worries. All right, my special guest again today was Dawne McKay. Talk Crash to Me. Remember, I don't want to die today. Do you? Remember, don't let anyone take the sands of time within your own hourglass. Until the next show, be safe.